is take on every case that comes from the city of Greater Sudbury, and that's another element of his bias. So he may be a nice man, but he's coming across here with a personal vendetta, and I don't care who you are, I don't care what kind of critic you are, you cannot say that his comment there was not a personal vendetta and a personal attack on the existing council. I get passionate about this.
Oh, yeah,
I love sitting here. I can't get like that on the other side.
I was going to say this has got to be great. Off the leash.
But those are issues, and it's, you know, I spent 20 years living in collective bargaining, law, legislation, union president. I've been involved with arbitrations of criminal cases. There's a boundary, there's a parameter, and you can't go beyond that when you're in a position of responsibility like the Ontario Ombudsman.
Well, Bob, let me get you to wade into, again, I mean, one of the great things about this show, of course, is that, you know, it was able to stay outside of, you know, whatever the flavor of the news cycle happened to be, but I'm gonna pull you into the news cycle for another minute here. And that was on, you know, a major difference that has just, you know, sort of exploded in the last few days between on the municipal bond issue. We have two of the leading mayoral candidates presenting very, very different ideas in terms of infrastructure renewal. This is something in your ward right across the city that's a very, very big issue. We know we're facing a huge infrastructure deficit. How are we gonna fix this? We have two very different views. We have Brian Bigger essentially accusing Dan Mellinson of having a credit card approach to infrastructure with his issue of municipal bonds. Where do you come in on that sort of issue?
Well, I like to take a look at the idea of buying a house. So a young couple will decide that they want to buy a house, and they're renting an apartment. They have a choice. They can rent the apartment and save their extra money until they have enough money to pay for the house in full. Which means that it may take them 30 years to save up enough money to pay for a $400,000 house that possibly 30 years earlier would have cost them $200,000. So they have a choice of renting. Now when they're renting, what if they're having trouble saving? What if they're having trouble making ends meet? 10 years down the line, they haven't saved anything. If you're renting something and you can save until you buy, then you don't start enjoying that new house until you move in. You live basically, you scrape by for 30 years until you can buy your new house. That's exactly the same as what we're sitting on with Sudbury, except it's worse. What's happening is we're spending money, patching things up every year, and at the end of the year, our deficit is larger. So we're getting in the hole from the money we're spending. So, yeah, Dan Mellinson brought this up. I know John Rodriguez has toyed with the idea too.
Yes, that's true, absolutely.
It's one of these things that's starting to come up because we're sitting in a situation where if we don't fix our infrastructure, we don't get the businesses moving in here. We don't get the houses being built. Our economy is starting to go down. Our growth has been projected low. So the first thing we're facing when we get elected is a 4.9% tax increase.
Yeah.
So what you need is an economic stimulus. So if you could make a good plan, it has to be a good plan. I've had critics saying, oh my God, you're gonna have all the roads done and we won't be able to move. And I'm saying, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to plan your construction so that you're not paralyzing the city over 4 years. But if you get it done and you have to borrow, here's what we're sitting on right now. We're paying $50 million a year to lose ground. If we were to borrow and issue municipal bonds, and there's a limit as to how much debt you can get into, but I think with municipal bonds you might be able to go higher. If you borrow it, if you mortgage, I think it's 25% of your revenue, your budget. So if we could somehow come up with $600 or $700 million to fix everything, now all of a sudden, look at the economic stimulus. Houses are going to be built because you've got construction workers going on. Every dollar you put into the economy multiplies by 4. So you're going to put 600 million in, you basically put $2.4 billion of economic activity in the Sudbury, everything flourishes, businesses start to come in. What happens? That $50 million that we're putting in every year just to maintain and lose ground is paying for the principal and interest, and lo and behold, our tax rates our growth is going up, so our individual taxes are going down, and that $50 million we were paying for is far less than, 10, 15 years from now. We've got the inflation, we've got the growth, everything happens. So I'm looking and saying, yeah, everybody's saying, oh no, we don't wanna go into debt, we don't wanna borrow, who buys a new car with cash? Who buys a new house with cash? You borrow so that while you're paying it off, you can enjoy the facility, you can enjoy the car. Why should we as a city say, we're gonna suffer and scrape by and chase all of our young people away from the city, and the only people left are the older people who are gonna have to pay higher taxes because all the younger people have gone?
Bob, do we have an issue with quality control when it comes to infrastructure? Do we have, this is obviously would be an unprecedented.
Not according to Brian Bigger. Brian Bigger says we've got all the quality parameters in place. Why is the quality not being, I don't know. Maybe we're not putting enough money into it to get the good job the first time.
Right.
I think this microphone that I'm speaking in, I think it's this microphone or that microphone, very expensive microphone.
Mm-hmm.
While in the past, we may have bought cheaper microphones and they only lasted a year.
Right. Put
The money in, buy good quality, and it's gonna last you the full length. So, quality control is just a matter of you get what you pay for. And I think the critics of, no, cut, well, okay, we might be able to cut some staff, but we can't do it in the next 6 months. Over the course of 30 years, yeah, okay, maybe you won't need as much staff. Now what happens is you're saving money on staff. That's money that can go into another initiative or it can go to pay down your debt. We could probably pay this debt down in 10 years after we get the efficiencies, after we get it started. But we need an economic stimulus in this city. I'm going to the builders, the Home Builders Association, they've got an event tomorrow night. And they have problems. You talk about the development charges.
Absolutely.
The big thing about the development charges is the development charges are paid by the homeowner.
Right.
They're not paid for by the
Oh, no,
developer.
it's passed right on, of
But the
course.
problem is, it's the extra things that the developer has to pay for before the development charges. Because you have to, there's a whole slew of stuff that the city requires you to do before you even put the shovel in the ground on your lot. So, the development charges comes at the time you're getting your building permit. The other stuff that's holding everything back is what the developer has to put in to prepare the ground. And you gotta do that before you get any development charges. So what's holding back the development of Sudbury is all of these extra costs that all of a sudden the city's slapping this on, the city's slapping that on, and developers are getting approval for a lot. Then they're going back and saying, oh, by the way, we're gonna add this to your cost. And that's why they're leaving town.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go somewhere else where we don't have to deal with this. They tell us one thing, bang, we're gone. So there are some problems in encouraging the development. And the development charge, if it is done properly and handled properly, and it's fair, won't really be a deterrent. But the way it is now, it's only part of the problem.
Right.
And that has to be looked at very carefully.
Very, very, very interesting. And Bob, while I've got you here, I also want you to weigh in on another issue, of course, that I was just speaking with Stefano about. There's long been talk in this town about a convention center. There are all sorts of, people have wish lists that are very, very long. Convention center, performing arts center, a new arena. How are we gonna get those things built in Sudbury? Are we ever gonna get them built in this city? Why are other cities able to do these things and it seems like Sudbury can't? What's going on here?
There's a list of wants and there's a list of needs. We haven't been able to take care of our needs yet. If we were to go through with a plan and we were able to take care of all those needs, which are the emergency things, the things that have to be dealt with now. If we were to take care of those, those things that we want, like the convention center and all this kind of stuff, they would come. Because all of a sudden now the private investors would see that this is a good place to invest, because you've got all of this growth, because all this infrastructure's been taken care of, the roads have been taken care of, everything else. Right now, why would they want to invest $100 million in a private-public partnership to come to Sudbury when we're dying? They have to make a profit. So the people that say, oh, get a public-private partnership? Yeah, sure, where?
Right.
Who in their right mind is gonna come here? The other thing is you gotta make sure you're getting what you asked for. Just in the last couple of minutes here, one of the big developers in town and we had everything set a number of years ago to have a big arena, 10,000 seat arena built up where Silver City is. It was almost ready to go, and they were gonna put all the money in and turn it over to the city after 20 years. Just had to pay a management fee and guarantee the loan. The deal breaker was that in order for them to come here, we had to guarantee a higher rate per ice time, per hour of ice time at that facility. But we also had to guarantee that all of the other facilities would charge the same rate so that people wouldn't go somewhere else where it was cheaper and leave them empty. That was a deal breaker, because now you're getting all this money coming in for this facility, but everybody else has to pay more for user fees in order to drive the traffic to the big arena so that they can make their profit. You might as well pay taxes. So that was a deal breaker. So if someone's coming in and they're gonna get in a public-private partnership, you gotta make sure you know what the terms and conditions are. And if they're not right, if a person just wants to build a casino in downtown Sudbury to suck all kinds of money out of this city, remember, every dollar they take through the till, we're losing $4 in economic activity in the city. Because if that dollar was spent in the city instead of in the casino, where it's going out of town, the profits, we'd have $4 of spin-off activity in the city. So it's not like, and what tourists are we gonna attract? Like the tourists are gonna come in, stay in hotels that are owned by people outside of our city, so the profit's going outside the city. They're gonna go into the big restaurants, the profits are gonna go to the franchises, and they're gonna spend the money in a casino, the money is going outside the city. There is no economic benefit. Do we want one? Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have a 10,000 seat arena, but we gotta take care of what you need first. You don't say, we don't have any food in the cupboard, but we're gonna go and buy a new car.
Right.
As a family. And you've got 13 people sitting around council, and they got a family of 160,000 people. And they have to consider what's best for the family, but they have to listen to what the family needs. And not just who the loudest person is in the room. And that's where we've had so many people on council in the last number of terms that have been letting the tail wag the dog. I use the fable, the miller and the donkey, and I think it's perfect. You know, the donkey finally gets away because the miller kept listening to everybody criticize him, and you know, he listened to every critic. Unfortunately, you gotta set your plan, listen to what the people want, and then you gotta have the courage to follow that plan through. And it's gonna take some courage, and it's gonna take somebody different to make it happen. And it's not gonna take a lot of younger people who have no experience coming in saying, we're gonna change the world, and find out the reality is the world's not willing to change just because you want it to change.
Wow, Bob Kirwan, I see now why you have the longer form.
I'm gonna sit on this side
I was
from
gonna
now.
say, this has been so interesting. Bob, I really appreciate you coming by.
Oh, it's been fun.
So happy to have you here, and you know, I mean, your curating of this program has really, I feel like it's elevated the discourse. I think that it's done so much to let people get behind the catchphrases and start hearing some of this stuff. Really appreciate you stopping by, Bob, and
I do want to thank you for taking on the task of continuing it, though, because I think most of the people are still coming in, and I do think this is a forum that most of the candidates enjoy because it allows them to speak and allows people to get to know them, and I don't think they feel threatened because they know that it's a friendly environment, so you're doing a good job, but I want it back after. October
Don't,
27th.
I am just keeping the chair warm for you,
Yeah,
sir.
great.
Listen, Bob, we wish you all the very best on October 27th. You've been listening to Bob Kirwan here on his program, The Learning Clinic, Meet the Candidates. We will be right back with Chris Nerpin, and we'll see you very soon. Stick around.
Hey,
Wow, Bob, so great, man.
I love that.
It's a real pleasure.